Rave to the Grave.
Hi, this is Vivian Host, and you're listening to Rave to the Grave, a podcast where we take partying very seriously. My guest today is none other than AC Slater, one of America's best-known and best-loved DJs. Not only has he headlined every EDM festival in the U.S., I'm talking about EDC, Ultra, Hardfest, but he's also played literally all over the world, from Moscow to Fiji to Kuala Lumpur. AC's name is synonymous with Nightbase, a party and a record label and a brand that he founded, which has almost single-handedly introduced the USA to a UK genre known as bass house or bassline. To some, it may seem like AC has had a meteoric rise to fame, but in reality, he's been working at this for about 20 years, producing dubstep, house, grime, hip-hop, and fidget, and DJing thousands, if not tens of thousands of parties, from crappy bars with 3 people in them to a sea of 25,000 ravers in the middle of a British field. AC, whose real name is Aaron Clevenger, is also quite literally like my brother. We spent about 6 or 7 years together having the wildest times as part of a New York City DJ crew called Trouble and Bass. We recorded this episode while AC was in New York as part of his High 8 tour, only a couple weeks before the city went into lockdown for COVID-19. Among other things, we talked about his teen years in West Virginia, his happy hardcore history, how to build your own music community, and Mr. Peanut. Welcome to Rave to the Grave.
What's up, Vivian?
What's up?
How's it going?
Good. I realized in the course of getting ready for this podcast that there are a lot of things that I have never asked you, despite us sitting on various buses and planes in various states of inebriation and hungoverness over many, many years. So I'm really excited that you're here.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm so excited for the inaugural Rave to the Grave podcast.
Okay, so I'm going to start at the very, very beginning. I mean, we'll get into Nightbase, we'll get into everything you're doing now, but tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
I grew up in a small town called Bridgeport. The closest thing to like any kind of like outside culture is like about 20 minutes away in a town called Morgantown, where WVU is, West Virginia University. So, you know, we would, as kids, travel up there. It was like in the 90s when I was a teenager, like the #1 party school in the country. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So like we were introduced to that kind of life early, you know, there was nothing else to do. It's kind of like when you grow up in West Virginia, your goal is kind of to leave there. And that was my big goal. But I was super into music from a young age. My dad is a musician. He always had like a big record collection. I would just pull out records but just based on the cover, if it looked cool, throw it on and listen to it, you know, make my own tapes and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, growing up there was not much to do. So I was really into skateboarding from about like age 14 into my like early 20s, like lived and breathed it. That's all we did all day, all night, skate, smoke weed and drink and, you know, and just get beat up and picked on because it wasn't cool back then. It's obviously like super cool now. But yeah, it was honestly a really cool life. I really enjoyed my life as a teenager. And then around 99, I moved to Philly, went to art school there. So that was like my first time living in like a proper city, and that was super exciting. But yeah, the West Virginia thing, like when I got into raving, the closest city was Pittsburgh. So we would travel like an hour or so, drive to Pittsburgh for a rave at a warehouse in like 1998, 1999.
So you were in high school when you were first
probably
going to raves?
Just out of high school, because I didn't know. All right, so this is like very, very early days of the internet. It wasn't like you could just log on and see everything going on. You had to like infiltrate like a community. There was like Hyperreal, which was like a mailing list. Whoever was in charge of that had developed regions. So there was one called PB Cle, which was Pittsburgh and Cleveland. So that was like our area, and West Virginia fell into that. So you would basically join the mailing list and you would get emails you would send an email to like this address that then forwarded it to everyone on the list. So you'd have conversations through email. So you would find out about parties and stuff like that and meet people. I grew up on like hip hop and punk, and I loved the idea of DJing, but I didn't know anything about it because no one around me did it. I would go to Miami to visit relatives every summer, and my cousin, who was my age, took me to his friend's house, and he had turntables, and it like blew my mind. He like was DJing and scratching, and I'd never seen that, and that was like, whoa, this is how it's done. Holy shit! Like, this is cool. This is what that music's for. And I bought like a shitty mixer at a pawn shop for like $30 and took it home and figured out how to use it. I had known the rave music, electronic music. I was super into like that mainstream stuff at the time, like Chemical Brothers and The Prodigy was really big. And I didn't have the context of the rave until I happened to come across one, and it was like, holy shit. Like, I didn't even know about the drug side of it or anything. You know what I mean? Like, back then everyone was like doing a lot of drugs, and it was like this, just walking into a rave, it was like the coolest moment. It was like, it all just clicked and I was like, that's why this music exists. The DJs play this for these people that are super into it, and it was just changed my life.
So tell me about the first rave that you ever went to.
I was living in Morgantown, West Virginia when I was 18, and I literally across the street from our apartment was like a VFW hall, and I had seen flyers for this rave, and we were like, let's go check it out. And it was like 187 was DJing. Remember her?
Yeah, so 187 is actually such an interesting story because it was really maybe the first person that any of us knew in this era of the rave scene who had transitioned. 187 is a drum and bass DJ, and was transitioning from male to female while having this career as a big rave DJ, and kind of having to deal with, the complete lack of awareness or, lack of public conversation around those things back in the late 90s.
And now that I like looking back on that, I totally forgot about it, that, you know what I mean? But that, because I knew 187, heard of 187 as a male, and then transitioned to female, as far as I know. And then like, no one like said like, oh, that's fucking weird. It wasn't like this whole thing. It was just like, okay. Like, no, there's maybe been a little bit of conversation, but it wasn't even like something that, I don't know. Isn't that weird? I don't know. I now find that kind of weird. It's such a big topic now. But that was like the first thing. I walked into that. I think she was DJing, and it was just like packed. We're in West Virginia. All these people from Pittsburgh and all over are there because it's that kind of community. You travel. It wasn't that big. The kids on the floor massaging each other, and people dancing, and the pants and the visors and the, all that stuff. And I was like, okay.
Wait, can we talk more about the pants?
The pants.
What are these pants that you're referring to? In case people are not familiar.
Yeah, we need to clarify that. So they did like, the two main brands were Kickwear. They had like, they would give you the measurement of the bottom seam. So it'd be like 56.
Yeah, people would brag about the measurement of the seams.
And then Genco was another company. But kids would take the leg and sew in like inserts so it would flare even more. So they kind of customized them, and it just looked ridiculous. Like now, looking at it now. I mean, I always thought it did. I wore them slightly fat pants, but not super fat. But I was really into the UFOs. So that was like the junglist uniform. This brand called UFO that had these sort of like parachute pant type thing. I don't know, how would you describe them? They have like ties at the bottom.
Yeah, they're parachute, like a more thin fabric. Oh, was that their thing? Is that you could wear them as a backpack? You could
turn it into a backpack.
Everything in a rave was like about your backpack. It was like your security blanket. 'Cause you're going to spend, 10 hours there and maybe, be on some substances and go through many moods. So you have to have this backpack.
I might need to take my pants off and turn it into a backpack.
Yeah, you might though. It might get hot in there. No, the thing about UFOs to me is they had all these strings on them, like hanging off them, so you could really get caught in an escalator if that was
it's living on the edge. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, really, that rave clothes of that era were super inconvenient.
Yeah, but it was so. That's one thing I noticed and that I was like attracted to was like just how insanely different it all was. it was almost like this secret thing that no one knew about. I was into the music and I didn't even know about it. You had to kind of stumble upon someone that was into it to let you in. And I remember walking in and it was like, you know, black, white, like gay people, straight people, like kid in a wheelchair, like every type of person. And I remember thinking like, and this is a time where like people called me like faggot for skating. Everyone was just so mean and like segregated as far as like interests and like lifestyles, and going in there was none of that, and I loved that. Like I loved that everyone was just like mixed together and there was no even like talk about it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember feeling that way too at the first parties that I went to. Like it was every kid that was maybe an outcast at their school of every different genre. Like the outcasts, even punks with Liberty Spike mohawks and everything, and then skaters, and then hip hop kids, and like anybody that was into any kind of subculture had somehow figured out how to get to this party.
Yeah.
And then we were like the island of the lost kids together.
Yeah, there was no like voice of leadership. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, there was no like, you're wrong for wearing that and you shouldn't be here. It was just kind of like, yo, everybody come. No one's really in charge. We all figure it out together. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
So you mentioned drum and bass, and I was actually reading some older interviews with you where you were saying when you were younger, you didn't really care for house music and like the 4/4 thing. Once you started getting like an awareness that there were these different genres in electronic music, what did you gravitate towards, and why do you think you like those things and not house music?
My entry point was like, the 90s, like bigger names that were making it onto MTV. But then from there, I discovered, the record shop with like the vinyl. So it was like house music just never, at that time, didn't really grab my attention. I liked it, but my attention span for music was really short. So like I preferred the drum and bass, hardcore stuff where there's like, the song breaks down, then there's like a crescendo and a drop. I really like that. Whereas a house song, especially back then, you're talking about like pure house music is like whatever, like a 9-minute long loop that doesn't really change. And as like a teenager, you're like, next, you know what I mean? So it wasn't until, just to jump ahead, like, I did hardcore and all this like that kind of stuff for years. And I never really enjoyed house. I liked hard house because it had like the same kind of structure, but like not until I heard like Switch and Sinden and people like that were adding bass lines and drops and breakdowns to house music then I was like, oh, I can get into this. And that kind of set me on the path that brought me here.
I mean, I actually think that's what you like to this day. Like if you play an AC Slater tune or you hear one, you always have a breakdown pretty soon into the track. It's like, you don't have to wait 2 minutes in and do this long mix. It's very much like, let's get to the exciting part now. And that's how your sets, I feel like, are structured too.
Yeah, give me the meat. Yeah, exactly. I enjoy now like more kind of pure, deeper house, but like, long blends and stuff. But overall, I just love excitement and quick like deliveries. You know what I mean? I love that. So.
Yeah, I would say that's one thing that we definitely have in common.
Have that very much in common.
So I know you kind of skipped over it, but we actually have to go back to the happy hardcore.
Yeah, here we go.
Because, okay, I don't even know where to begin with this, but I feel like we need to shed a light on happy hardcore because it's this genre that you were deeply in love with and kind of your first big wave of fame or recognition as a DJ. So, okay, first I'll explain in your words, what is happy hardcore like to somebody that's never heard it before?
I mean, you go back to like 92 kind of like rave sound where it was like 140 kind of break beat with like pianos and like diva vocals and stuff. That's like the UK sound that then over time split into two things. One was jungle, which became drum and bass and all of that. And then the other one was hardcore, which mostly dropped the break beats over time, sped up the tempo. They both sped up the tempo, but hardcore kept the pianos, kept the vocals. It's just kind of really fast, cheesy, four to the floor music with happy vocals and crazy build-ups and drops. And you can't even, it's like fist pumping music. You can't really dance to it. I mean, people did, but that was like, to me, like out of everything that was out at the time, and then like late 90s, I guess, that really spoke to me, because it was just like, there was like gabber and like speedcore, which is like a darker version of like happy hardcore, and also more American, I think, and Dutch. But the happy hardcore just caught my attention because it was more the closest thing to like sort of like the punk of dance music. You know what I mean? It was just so fast and no fucks given. Pump your fist, get excited, wait for your favorite. Because basically there's a lot of anthems. There's not a lot of filler tracks. There's only like, at that time, 16, 20 producers that really make all the music. So they just make whatever songs were like anthems. You know what I mean? So you would go to a party that was all happy hardcore and hear the same songs all night, but no one gave a shit.
This wasn't even something that like in LA you couldn't hear that much. Like what was the, how'd you get there?
So I think I found like, I'd heard about the Anabolic Frolic Happy to Be Hardcore compilations that were on Moonshine. And that might have been my first entry. I also had a friend, Rufus, who lived in West Virginia, who was from the UK, who had like tapes from like raves, because you could buy like live recording tapes when you went to the rave. And then I started finding them at raves here in like Pittsburgh. There was a guy that sold tapes, this old British guy that sold tapes at parties. So I would just buy all the happy hardcore ones. And it was tapes from like tape packs. So just a background in the UK, for like the UK garage and the hardcore parties and drum and bass parties, they would do the tape pack where they would record the whole evening of a big party. Everyone's set on a tape. And so yeah, I would buy those kind of individually at these shows. And then I started ordering them through the mail. And it was just amazing hearing like, that's the center of the scene is the UK for happy hardcore. And just hearing like, the MCs with the crowd, like with the whistles and horns, them blowing the entire time, and just like the energy. And I was just like, I want to be there. I want to be there. So I just really got into it. And like when I started Night Bass, I wanted to do tape packs. So I do tape packs on SoundCloud because that really made me want to be there. And I wanted kids to have that same experience because I record the crowd and the sets. So when you listen to our sets from Night Bass, you feel like you're there. When I play certain songs that were on the bigger mixes that are popular, the crowd will be like making like ooh, ooh, or whatever. They'll do it in other cities at the same exact spot because they had like listened to it on the recording. But yeah, I mean, to get into happy hardcore, it was like the tapes really. And then I started to find people through like the internet that were into it. And then that was it. I eventually started a vinyl label in 99. We were throwing parties around like Pennsylvania, Ohio, like just ridiculous part. Like we didn't know what we were doing, but it was like hilarious, just debauchery, like raves. Yeah, crazy stuff.
So what kind of venues were you renting out, or what was putting together one of these parties like a happy hardcore party in Pennsylvania in 99? What does it involve?
There was one that was a church, probably the worst venue that we could have been given. It was a church, but it also had a recording studio inside. So I guess the owners or whatever were like cool about music, and we did a rave there. And I was like a pretty bad kid, and my friends were like, we're all just kind of like troublemakers, not like in a malicious way, but we just like to get into mischief and like break things and drink and, you know what I mean? Just mess with each other and all that kind of stuff. So we did this party at this church, and, we all it's all these people from other cities, and we're all together. Every time we were together, we had a crew called American Cheese. We would all get together, throw an American cheese party. And it was just like the reunion, and everyone was just like ready. And it would just be like alcohol. We're all underage, but it was just like totally illegal like situation. But like somehow we put together a party, and my friend Kevin made flyers, and people would just come and play. And it was amazing. I remember like at that church, so much crazy stuff happened. A friend of mine like was wasted and he found this like big glass like orb. There was like a stage basically, and he just like punted it into the crowd, and like I was like, I wonder what happened with that orb when it landed in the, stuff like that. And like some kids like wrecked the backstage. I don't know, just all kinds of crazy stuff. And someone would pass out and they'd get drawn all over their face. And yeah, I don't know. We were just, it was pure fun. There was no money. There was no like, I'm going to make it. It was just us having fun and being with each other. And other kids came and watched basically us like acting like idiots and playing music. I cherish it. It was really fun, really fun.
What was the first rave that you went to, or one of the first things where you just like, it was mind-blowing to you, either in the size of it or what was going on or like the debauchery of it?
There's one experience like in Pittsburgh. There was this guy, if I can remember his name, he was a happy hardcore DJ, but I looked up to him because he was like kind of an OG of that in like the Pittsburgh area. I believe his name was Demofo. And he did an event called Everyone Gets Laid. And yeah, it's like a Xerox like punk style flyer on like pink paper. And it was at a camping ground like outside of Pittsburgh somewhere. And there was like 4 stages, and that was my first like real gig. And me and all my friends went, and like it was crazy. You're in the dark. There's no like any kind of like authority. It's just a bunch of kids raving. There's like 3 or 4 stages. It's all generators. I had to play, and at some point I was on my way to the stage, and one by one, all of the other stages, the generators died. So the only one that was working was the stage I was playing. So basically this giant rave is my first gig on this tiny happy hardcore stage. There's nowhere else to go. So everyone from the whole party like came to my stage. And it was just like this weird like synergy moment where like it was my first like real gig. And it was just like, I was so nervous, and I'm playing vinyl, it's different time, like dragging your vinyl and it's like skipping or whatever. But I mean, it was a great set, and it was just like everyone was there. It was just like perfect timing of like
the rave gods smiled upon you.
And I just, from that point on, the feeling of the reactions and just DJing for people, it was awesome. Yeah.
I kick in like a turbo booster.
A lot of bad things happened back in those days. I'm not trying to glamorize it, but what I remember is the older kids or the more seasoned kids would look out. Like everybody was looking out for everybody. Cause like you said, sometimes you'd be at a camp out with no like quote unquote adults around for miles or like anyone. And like you would have to just look out for each other because there wasn't a security guard that you could go ask or an ambulance.
Yeah, I loved it. It was like a tough love, like an older raver would just like, not like be a dick, but like say something that like you needed to hear and like help you. You know what I mean? And you're right. Everyone looked out for each other a lot. And you're right also that we romanticized that time and oh man, it was crazy and all, but I'm sure a lot of bad things happened, that we didn't know about because there wasn't all of the free flow of information that anyone could get. But
I'm happy we didn't know about it, to be honest.
But I think that's something that might be lost a little bit at this point in time, like that community. I know there's a lot of communities that look out for each other and within the scene, but for example, like I was playing, there's been a lot of times in the past, like, let's say like 5 years where I'm playing a set. I was playing at some festival last summer, and during my set, like someone collapsed like in the front, and I was like, I just stopped the music and I was just like, can we get a medic or whatever? And it was taking forever, and I don't know who it was, but someone involved with the show was like, what are you doing? Like, put the music back on, like everyone's gonna leave. I'm like, but someone could be like dying right there. It's like, you'd want to be like the guy that told me to play the music when like someone's dying. You know what I mean? It was just like, let's look out for each other. And even there was another DJ there, that like an up and coming DJ, and I was kind of explaining all of that to him, and you could tell it's like something that no one had ever like brought up. Like it's not something he had ever thought to think about, ever had to think about, like what to do if that happens. And like he learned from me telling him like, fuck these guys, fuck these promoters, like that kid's life could be on the line. And eventually they came and took him away, and he waved, and then I was like, fuck you. You know what I mean? Like, but also those people around him should like be like, yo, slow down, or drink some water, or whatever you're doing. You know what I mean? Yeah, but you'd be surprised. Like people don't care. Back then it was like deeply people like cared, you know, because it was like a special secret thing. Now it's just like a concert, you know? And if you're not the person that's stepping in and helping, like you're not Rave to the Grave. You're not, this isn't your scene. You're just like someone making money off of it or whatever. And like, it's also our responsibility to like teach newer people, younger people that are getting into our position that's important, right? Like they're just not going to know without us telling them.
It's just wild because the rave scene has exploded and is so giant. And now we're not talking about this party that maybe there's 300 people or 500 people or even 1,000 people. It's like you're trying to look out for people at this rave where there's 30,000 people, 100,000 people. It's like just the scale is so giant. Mm-hmm. But I guess since we're talking about the early days of you DJing, why did you pick the name AC Slater?
So like growing up, I had like a handful of friends named Aaron, and you had to like distinguish yourself. So they just called me AC. And whenever I was introduced to someone, oh, this is AC. And they'd be like, oh, like AC Slater from Saved by the Bell. And then when it was time to like, oh, you have a gig, like you need a DJ name, it was like a joke that just stuck. And I literally hated it for years, but I've kind of grown to love it a little bit and kind of try to reclaim it from the TV show. You know, it's such an old show anyway. Sometimes it comes up and kids are like, huh? Saved by the what? You know, it's kind of weird.
You're like, go watch it. It's a classic. Screech is a madman.
Mario Lopez followed me on Twitter at one point. Yeah, it's like a love-hate relationship with the name, for sure.
I mean, DJ names are funny. Like, did you have any other names, or were you always AC Slater?
Yeah, that was it. Beginning? Even when I left hardcore, I was just burned out on hardcore. This is around when I met you and like Luca and everybody.
Which was what year?
I would say like 2006, maybe, something like that. And I was still playing hardcore shows. And I remember playing a show at Exit in Greenpoint. There was a happy hardcore party there, and I was DJing, and I pulled out my flip phone to see what was going on. And I knew there was a Trouble and Bass party, and I was looking out at the crowd, and it was like so young, and I was just kind of over the music. And I was like getting older. I was like, I'm 26 or something maybe. And like, I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, I finished my set and I went to Trouble and Bass, I think, you know, but yeah.
And it changed your life.
It changed my life. Can I tell a story about kind of meeting you guys?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Let's give people some context. So,
yeah.
We started a crew in New York City, actually started by a DJ by the name of Drop the Lime, who now lives in Berlin and goes by Curses. We started that crew really in 2004, but I think we say that the anniversary is 2005. So we really liked bassline and grime and like the very early dubstep and Baltimore club and all these genres that like a normal club wouldn't book us to play at because it was too loud and fast and crazy. And
I would say like very DIY. Like you were making parties for a scene that didn't exist yet. Print out the little slogans and stick them all over the walls on like 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper and like hot, sweaty place and design everything yourselves. And, you know, it wasn't like the indie disco and all that stuff that was happening, the indie dance, whatever they called it, when the leather jacket appeared. and the fedora. Like that was very like label driven, you know, it was like a product almost. Whereas like what you were doing was like an organic grassroots kind of thing, which is obviously what I'm always attracted to. So I was very attracted to it. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's the context.
That's the context.
So,
hit me with this fire story that I don't know about.
So I played at a place in Brooklyn in Williamsburg in like probably 2006 or 7. I just started doing kind of house tempo stuff that's like similar to what I do now. And just getting started, didn't change my name. I was still AC Slater. And I played a gig, a Palms Out, which was a blog. Also, blogs were really big back then. That's where everyone got their music, right? So like there was a blog called Palms Out. They did a party at a venue in Brooklyn called Hugs. And I played, and when I was done, I walked off stage and just walked through the crowd because there's no like other way to go. And you, the captain, and Luca dropped a line. We're just standing there, three of you side by side with your arms folded. And like the lighting was so funny because think about how these guys dressed back then. It was all black. Like they kind of looked like vampires. They were right in my path. And I was like already a fan. And I'd been talking to Luca through MySpace a little bit and sending him tunes. And he was like, that was really great, man. Like, it's great to see someone that can mix and you play really good music. And you guys were really cool to me. And it was weird because it was such a different scene than I was in. I was in a happy hardcore rave scene. And you guys were in this kind of cool underground hipster rave thing that you were building. And I was like, they're not going to be nice to me. You know what I mean? I just like assumed. And like, yeah, he was so nice. And then it just quickly evolved into like, do you want to join our crew? But that just like walking out and seeing you guys, it was almost like a silhouette of like these 3 vampires. And I was like, wow. And then, yeah, we became friends and it was like amazing.
I'm really happy to hear that because that's definitely what we were going for.
You fully accomplished it. It was so funny, man.
Before we move on, okay, wait. So
there's a lot to unpack here.
There's a lot to unpack here. But one of the things is you moved to New York from Philly. Mm-hmm. You said you went to art school? Mm-hmm. What did you go to school to do?
I originally went to school. I was like a loser. Like I went to school at WVU right out of high school and I failed out. Then I was like staying at home, trying to do music, just kind of a loser, just like lost, didn't know what to do. And then a friend of mine had gone to the Art Institute. So I was like, I'm going to go to Philly and go to the Art Institute. And I was really into video from my skateboarding days. I taught myself how to edit video. And within like the first semester, I realized that I like knew more than like the teachers. So I was like, I can't do this. But I knew I'd wanted to do music, but I couldn't get into a music school at that time. There was no DJ school. There was no like producer school. You had to like, if you want to get into music school, you had to like play guitar or piano and like audition, So I couldn't do that. So I just wanted to do a fallback thing. So the video thing was shit. So I did like web development. So I learned some skills there and that like I landed a job in New York. That's when I moved to New York. That experience, moving to Philly, being in like an urban environment, meeting all these people. And that was like, Philly was like a huge drum and bass scene at the time. We were doing hardcore events there. I had started my label there. Met a lot of really sick people who I'm still friends with, who I saw at a gig I played there last night. Went broke for like 15 years because of it, but it was worth it, I got my job. It took me to New York because there was no jobs there. So I went to New York.
When did you decide, like, I'm going to quit my job and like do this DJing full time, seriously?
That was a huge step for me. When I had my day job, I loved the company. I worked for a small company. They were called Cyber New York, as a web development company. I learned a lot there. It was like maybe 10 people worked there. At the same time, would work all day, come home, make music all night, go to work, and then do it all over again. And then like starting to get gigs. My output was like insane. I was putting out like a remix every week, a release every week, like constantly. And that scene was like starting to blow up. This sort of like blog house bassline kind of fidget scene was like really blowing up. So I started getting gigs and it was kind of interfering with my job. So it was like at a crossroads where I was like, should I keep this job and like have a steady paycheck and health insurance and whatever and have a really sick hobby? Or should I just like take a risk and not have a steady paycheck and possibly go broke and hungry and just attempt to make this cool hobby into a career. So I decided to do the cool hobby into a career path and like saved up a little bit of money, quit, and then just went into grind mode. And like leading up to that was like really scary because this is before the EDM explosion. And this is like 2007. And like, yeah, I just did it. And I took a lot of advice from like Luca had just done the same thing. Lauren Flax, the same thing. And so I was just kind of like referring to these people for advice. And they were like, just do it. And then like, don't stop working once you do it because it will catch up with you. And I did it. I just build and build and build until eventually it was like agent was interested. And then it just went from there, you know. It was scary, but the best thing I've ever done. I remember just walking around at like 2 in the afternoon and like getting a coffee and taking my time and being like, yes, I fucking made it, even though I was like broke. But yeah, it's a scary thing, but I think you have to do it if you want to make it into a career.
Yeah, it's really crazy for me to hear you describe your younger years as kind of like being a loser and not really doing well in school and whatever, because you've always had one of the craziest work ethics of like anyone that I know. This kind of like tireless doing things and putting out music and finishing stuff all the time.
It's the fear of like, you know, growing up without like a lot of money and like, you know, I was taken care of. We were good, but like, I just had this fear of like going broke. So I'm going to like work until I feel like I can take a little break. I'm still like that. I just know that it could all go away like really fast if you don't do it right. And it's like a weird fear that makes me do that. And also I love doing it. So yeah, sleep is good too sometimes.
In this time that you're discussing, like from 99 or something until now, like there's been so many different shifts in the rave scene and also in the technology and the things that you have to do to actually have a career as a DJ. Even alone, just the different technology that you've had to learn to like DJ or produce. Like you had to switch from vinyl and buying records in shops to like the whole Bloghouse era and Serato and Tractor. And then you get CDJs and then it's like, and all the social media that you now have to do as a DJ. And basically what you're doing to be a successful DJ now is like almost completely different.
It's not
than
the same thing.
What you were doing in the year,
Yeah.
you know, 2000 or 2006.
It's a good point. Yeah, it's changed so much. There's so much more like access to you as a person online. So you have to address. It's so weird that everyone expects you to like say something about everything or like lately I've been getting a lot of messages that are like, hey, can I have like your hat? Or like, you know, like stuff you would never ask someone just because you're there in their face. I guess they feel like they know you, but you never had that before. It was all like a mystery. There was such a mystery around everything. Now it's like, there's no mystery. Like you see me, people tell you what they had for lunch. You know what I mean? It's like, you know everything about someone without knowing them. So it's very different.
People call you dad and
People
mom.
call me dad. Yeah. Susie's mom. Yeah.
Well, that's something I actually wanted to ask you about because I think about this a lot. So I just think there was a time where people were trying to not talk about their past history. Like we know a lot of DJs, for instance, that were in drum and bass that sort of like rebranded and reinvented their career and started producing like electro house or something else. And it was like supposed to be this big secret. And I now feel like we've kind of entered into a new era where it's like, people are talking about their history and all of the stuff that they've done. And there's not this like, I need to hide that I'm not 25 years old or whatever.
For me, like it's become about authenticity because I think that people sense that. Say you have like a gimmick and you're this character that you play. That's cool. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't want to have to constantly keep that up and do that. Because like how long can you do that? Like, I want to just be myself. Then you're just there. You don't have to worry about all that bullshit. It's like, it's fun. It's kind of like therapeutic to like, especially the high 8 stuff. It was like, it's cool for people to see what you were because they can see themselves in you. And like, if you're playing like a festival, like you said, all these big festivals or whatever, it's like, you might look like something bigger than you are, but you're just the same kid that's out there who just followed their path longer. They're just starting. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that's cooler than like pretending to be younger or like something else or I don't know. That would get exhausting to me. That's just not for me.
So you referred to it a bit earlier, but let's talk about when you moved from New York to Los Angeles. So did you kind of got like a whim, right? And then decided to move to LA?
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna live and die in New York for the rest of my life. And like I loved it, but I kind of had a routine and like my regular things that I did. And I started traveling to LA a lot and hanging out with like 12th Planet and his manager, Danny United, at their sort of like loft space downtown. And it was always so inspiring. Like all these different people would come through, listen to these new tunes. And it was like this cool, like community, like a vibe. And like New York at that time, I think it was like 2011 or something, 12. And like, I don't know, in New York, like we were together, we had our crew, Trouble and Bass, but like everyone is very like protective in New York. The mindset isn't as open. People aren't like, hey, come through. And also there's no space really. So it's like, there's not like a big air, unless you're fucking rich, you don't have like a big space where everyone can gather. But when I went out there, everyone was just open. Like, what are you doing? Oh yeah, we should collab. And blah. Whether it's real or not, at least there's the opportunity to talk about it. Whereas here, people were kind of secretive about what they're doing. It's like competitive. I was just kind of getting bored of the routine. My manager at the time, we were meeting up and he was like, I have an idea. I think you should move to LA for a year. Cause he's like, every time I talk to you, when you're in New York, you talk about just like hanging out and having fun or whatever. And when you're in LA, you always talk about how inspired you are and how inspiring it is. So I moved to LA planning to stay there for a year. And now it's been about like a little over 8 years, which is nuts. But like, yeah, I would go there and stay on the couch there. And on the couch, the other couch next to me is like Skrillex, and then you wake up and like Diplo comes through. And like, it was just like, why am I like in New York, just like going out and drinking and then being alone in the studio all day, every day, like when I could come out here and just be around everyone. And that's what really sparked it. And just knowing that I had a group of friends out there already. And then once I got out there, everything just took off. Like the whole night bass idea. I met my wife. Yeah, I'm not leaving. I miss New York a lot, but LA helped me switch up my mindset a little bit to be a bit more motivated, I think.
So it's interesting to me that you call this album Outsiders and you had this concept that you were sort of an outsider in this scene, because I've always seen you as the popular one. But it's interesting to me for you to say that you felt maybe in that really big EDM scene in LA that you were somehow an outsider, or this music that you wanted to play was like the outsider music.
I don't mean like outsider in the sense that like people don't like me or get me or whatever. But for some context, like the Happy Hardcore label, there was no like American starting a Happy Hardcore label in 1999. There was a British guy that lived in America that had the only Happy Hardcore label. But I was the first American to start a Happy Hardcore label. To me, that's like an outsider. Like that's not a popular thing. No one was doing it.
The label was called Pitched Up.
Pitched Up
by
recordings.
The way.
It's ridiculous. We put like prank phone calls on the vinyls and stuff like that. Yeah, it was fun. But like to me, I saw like Trouble and Bass, being a part of Trouble and Bass. That's like an outsider kind of thing. Like paving our own way, our own ideas of like what a party should be. Even like when I moved to LA, that was when like EDM, the term EDM popped up and people were making millions of dollars. And like, here I am like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Like, I just came out here and everyone's chasing it. So like, admittedly, I got like lost and kind of made some weird music that didn't fit because I was trying to be inside that bubble. And when I say outsider, I mean that like, I'm always doing something that to me at least appears like, it's like trying to fit into something that isn't there. Like during that era, I would get offers for like festivals and they would be like, obviously I can't play the house stage because I play too heavy. I can't play the dubstep stage because I don't really play dubstep. So there was never a place for me. And then I was never as underground as a lot of people, a little bit more reaching to a bigger audience. But that puts me in between the two audiences. You know what I mean? When I started Night Bass, it was just like Avicii, Afrojack, Skrillex, dubstep. All that stuff was all there was in LA. You could go to like a warehouse, like techno party or something, but there was no like bass house outlet. You couldn't go hear bass house. So like when I started Night Bass and then we were doing shows, like every DJ I booked was from the UK and they've never been to America. But to me, they're like the people I was loving, like Taiki, New Light, Lorenzo, Shifky, all these people that were really pushing that sound over in the UK. And I would like be like, all right, Taiki New Light's headlining, and the club or whoever I was working with would be like, are you sure? Like, we don't know who the fuck this is. And like, are you sure about this? I don't think so. And like, that's just what I mean by outsiders. Like, no one else got it. So I had to like make it. When I say outsider, that's kind of what I mean. Like, yeah, not as much of an outsider as before, but I have the heart and experience of being an outsider my whole life. Even like back to skating, getting beat up for skateboarding. It's like, you know what I mean? You put up with that shit, you feel like an outsider, you know?
Got no jump back.
So what do you attribute? I mean, like you said, it's like the whole night-based thing. You move to LA, you start it, and it blows up pretty fast. And now you're at the point where you have your own stages at all these different festivals, like the night-based stage, and you can book whoever you want. Night-based is synonymous with this sound and with AC Slater and all this. But basically, how did you make that blow up so fast? Like, what elements do you think it took?
So I think I took everything I've learned from the past that we've kind of touched on already. Originally, it was just a party. The label came later and all of that. So I wanted it to be more than just a cool party. I wanted the kids to know each other and, be passionate about the music. I wanted them to trust me and trust any flyer that was a night-based party. Even if they didn't know the DJs, they could trust that it would be something they liked. And like, it worked. Our fans are like so dedicated and so tight with each other. And it's insane. Like, so we did our monthly in LA at this club called Sound. It's kind of like home base, and like, we've been doing it for over 6 years there. And I'll walk around and just talk to kids every time. It'll literally be like, this is my wife, I met her at Night Base, or this is my best friend, I met him at Night Base. We went to a wedding and it was like Night Base themed, like shit like that. And it's like, that's really cool to me, like, because it's not about like going to a show and staring at a screen or whatever. It's about like connecting with everyone else there. Because when I walked into that first rave, everyone was so nice and friendly, and all I thought was, I want to be a part of this. So I wanted to bring that aspect back, because when I started it, this is the era, you have to think of like the time. It was the era of like people standing on top of turntables with like gigantic pyrotechnics, and you know what I mean? It was just so dry and like dead and like no soul. Like, that's cool, like, but there's no scene there. That's like a show. And like, I wanted to mix in the really nice like scene community aspect. So I think that's why it really worked. And then also I think the tape packs really helped out a lot, because people started to ask, we want Night Base in like Toronto, we want Night Base in New York, because they had heard the tapes, and it just spread. Because again, at that time, there's no one like it. You go to the UK and hear that, but in America, nothing quite like that, really. Either like pure house music or like Dirty Bird. There's no one with like aggressive like house bass lines, There was a hole that was missing something like that, and people wanted it. And the fact that it was presented in a non-threatening way that was like, yo, come be a part of this. And that continues now.
What do you feel like it takes? I think as DJs, we all know, and I think everyone knows at this point, that it's not just about who can mix records well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are the other skills that people really need, or that you have that have enabled you to be able to do this?
I've had to really, in the past couple of years, really teach myself about like time management. Like, when I wake up, I'm a very early riser. Like, I start working. So like, I've got like Night Base events, record label, merch line, AC Slater, like shows, studio, all that kind of stuff. And then like real life, like personal life stuff that you have to do. So like, it's a lot to juggle. So I wake up I'll wake up, start working at like 7:30. And next thing I know, it's like 10 p.m. So like, I have to like, I literally go through my day and I have a to-do list, but I'll put it literally by the minute of like what I'm going to do all day. Because if I don't do that, I get flustered and just like don't do anything because I'm like, oh, stressed. Like, oh, this person's calling me. This person's texting me. I'm getting these emails. So time management's really important. Otherwise, I'm just worthless. Learning how to travel is like really important. Getting sleep when you can. Staying like active. These are things I've all learned like way too late. I've cut back on drinking a lot. That was like really affecting me. It's something I've done since I was a teenager. Drink heavy and like dabble in drugs here and there. And like, it was just like, as your career is getting busier, for me at least, it was getting in the way, even though I was telling myself like, this is my job. I'm supposed to drink like this, you know? I went sober for like a few months, had a lot of realizations and like self-reflection of like, just like stuff I'm telling myself. Like it was almost like alcohol was like a voice in my head. Like any social situation, I was like, I have to drink. It like helps me because I'm shy. You know, I try to hide that. But like when you drink, it feels easier. But what actually happens is like you drink and then like after you drink, the next day you're almost like more introverted, like a bit anxious, and you know what I mean? It's a little bit different and hungover. But I would just be like, it's cool. I'll have a couple drinks. We're going out to this like whatever opening thing with some friends, and like it just escalates because I can't control my intake once I start. So like just because of like the touring, like I'm learning moderation, which is something I've never known since I was 15.
So what do you think that you have learned in the course of your career becoming a raver and then becoming a DJ? Like, how do you think that it's like changed you as a person, or what are some of the life lessons that you may have learned while being at a rave?
I mean, I just like really, especially DJing and like touring and playing clubs and shows, like really made me come out of my shell as a person, like socially, because I was always very shy and kind of nervous around people. And this is the opposite of that, what we do. You have to be around people, horrible people, good people, neutral people. So like you learn how to kind of come out of your shell. What else? I feel like I've learned a lot from having 3 different labels and working with treble and bass. I've learned a lot about like business, even though it's on a weird small scale, like how to kind of build a brand and how to maintain integrity and authenticity. And like we were talking about building the brand you want, building Nightbase to be how I want it. The hardest part in life is figuring out your passion. You know what I mean? Like you can't pursue something that you haven't figured out yet. And it took me years to realize that I had already found it in music, but I just didn't think it was a possible thing. And eventually you do it, you know? And also bring an extra pair of underwear with you. Wearing it with the other pair.
Double.
A good tip I've learned for traveling too, that I do all the time, I just throw some dryer sheets in there. If you're going to be traveling a lot, it's all about the dryer sheets, right?
Big up.
Keeps it fresh.
Respect. I also like to bring a couple extra Ziploc bags
Mm-hmm.
because you just
Heavy.
never know. You might put the dirty socks in there. The conditioner might spill something.
Throw some snacks, whatever.
Snacks.
Yeah,
Yeah, you might take your rider. You might get might steal some DJ's cashews and you can put that in the bag. Okay, I have one last question, and I've always wondered this. Do you get nervous when you play these giant stages anymore?
I always get nervous. Like every show, the bigger festival stages are very intimidating. I feel a lot of pressure to impress because it's going to be a lot of people that don't know who I am, right? So I think deeply about what tracks I'm going to play, stuff like that. But it's the same as a small club. Like once you get up there, you stand up there, you see it, and you're fucking shitting your pants. And then after like a mix or two, you're in the groove. You know, if everything's running smooth, maybe you got a couple of friends around or whatever, it's nice, you know? I suffer from a little bit of anxiety here and there. And like, I've literally been playing in front of like 10,000 people and have like a panic attack. And that's a fucking weird one. That will like throw you off. But it's just fucking like fight through. I have had to like fight through it, you know? But like I said, once you get rolling, yeah, the crowd's on your side. They want it to be good. They want to enjoy it.
I mean, you have it pretty prepared ahead of time. I don't mean like pre-mix, but I just mean like, you know, to some degree what you're going to do. I don't think you can go into that situation without knowing, right?
Yeah, it depends. Like, definitely the first like handful of tracks for a show like that, I have an agenda. Like some kind of classics. I'll do some edits that are just exciting. And then, yeah, some dubs, some new stuff. That's my main thing as a DJ. Is I'm more a producer and a label owner that wants to really promote music that's new. And I think my fans want to hear new stuff that's not out yet. That was another thing I wanted to bring into Night Bass, was that culture, the dub plate culture of like, we would go to a drum and bass show and see someone from the UK and be like, what song is that? What song is that? That's like the best part, right? You like the songs you know, but you want to hear the new shit that's going to be the future song you love. So I wanted to bring that back. And I think a lot of those kids love the new stuff, always asking, what's this song? What's this song? Taking videos, giving it names, like all that kind of stuff. That's, yeah.
Singing the bass line to you.
Singing the bass line, yeah.
I think it's cool that you want to play new music and stuff that people haven't heard. And sometimes I think EDM, to me, got to some point, like you said, I think one of the things that got a little stale about it is you would see all the headlining DJs sometimes on a festival and they're all playing this set that includes like...
Here's one you all know.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it almost, I'm like, what is it, the greatest hits? Now that's what I call music 2000 and...
Yeah, when people like in a Bloghouse days are playing like Nirvana and stuff, because no one was doing it up until that point. So that was cool. Now it's just like, all right, here's another track you guys know. Your parents listened to it.
Like, it's just trippy to me.
Yeah. I mean, to be completely honest, I don't have like a printed out like list of songs, but like on this tour, I've gotten a lot of friends playing with me, like opening right before me, that I know they play a lot of the same music as me because we're like the same bubble of music. And like, there's certain moments that I've been playing in my sets where these certain songs that are like really big. And I was like, pulled like Benny aside and was like, would you mind saving like these 3 tracks? I think that's different than being like, you cannot play these 60 songs. You know what I mean? Just because it's my show. So I want to like do as good as I can. And I know these moments work. And then, if like Taiki plays before me, I take out all the Taiki tunes. You know what I mean? It's fine. It's like, and I know there's certain songs he plays, I won't play those because I want to keep it fresh. Not like those old drum and bass and hardcore parties where you hear the same 12 songs every single set.
And they were exciting every time.
You still got excited every time. We live in a different world. You know what I mean? There's so much music now to choose from. Back then it was like, what's on vinyl? What do I have?
Yeah, a lot more limitations.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just send this one out to the fledgling DJs out there. If you are playing before AC Slater or anyone really, don't play all their tunes.
Yeah, that was like
don't do a whole set of AC Slater songs before AC Slater comes on.
That felt like a lost rule, but I believe that rule has seemingly come back. The word got around that that's not cool. So I did play a show in like Canada once, and the girl that played before me was on like Ableton, and she literally, when I walked in, every single song was like my song. I heard like 8 AC Slater songs, and I kept telling the promoter, like, you got to tell her to stop. This is like my whole like catalog. And he went and told her, and she felt really bad because she thought it was like a tribute or something. And I'm like, oh, those are my songs.
Dead yet?
Yeah.
You just die.
Bad news, ladies and gentlemen. AC Slater passed away on the way to the club in Regina, Canada.
Oh, Regina. Someone didn't think that through.
But yeah, do you. I mean, if you want to play all the guys' songs, you probably won't get booked much longer, but do whatever you want to do,
All right. Speaking of massives, what is the most massive you have ever been to?
I think Boomtown in the UK. We did a night-based stage at this festival called Boomtown. The festival itself is like 60,000, maybe more. There's so many stages. And then we did a night-based stage at this stage called Bang High. And I think at our stage that night, the number could be a little bit off, but I want to say like 25K just for our stage. I've never seen a sea of people like that. It was so weird. Like when you're really high up, it's like this giant construction and you're at the top and there's all these screens around and it's like some kind of theme, like post-apocalyptic or something. And like, I'm looking down and it doesn't look really like people. You know what I mean? It's just like a color of like heads. And it was like, you know, me, Lorenzo, Taiki, Shifkey, Cause and Effect. My wife, Susie, was there, Jack Beats, a bunch of people. And it was like, we were all kind of just like, this is insane. We got there super early before the stage opened. It's a huge field, but there's like a perimeter of like security guards kind of stopping them from the main area within the speakers. So all the kids are starting to gather. We're watching this and they're like pretending to run in and the guys are grabbing them. And then eventually they're like, fuck it, just go in. And they all run. And it was like, if you've seen like that show, The Walking Dead, when they're all like running at someone, it was like that. Like they're all just running in, like thousands of kids. I've never seen anything like it. It was like really cool experience.
Thinking about going to Boomtown, so I'm glad you mentioned
awesome.
it. But the themes at Boomtown are crazy, right?
So they have like, the whole thing with Boomtown is they have like all these sort of like little cool installations, like plays with like actors and like different themes. It's like insane. It's so next level art, all this different art and like culture. And just look at the lineup. It's like every band, every DJ, like it's crazy. Everything from punk to rap to drum and bass to country to like reggae to spoken word. It's really crazy.
I couldn't figure out what the aesthetic was. It kind of looked like
slightly
Apocalypse or
It's slightly
Westworld. I'm like, what do I wear to this thing?
Yeah.
That's what I really want to know.
A bit burnery, like a British version of Burning Man people.
So like a monocle and like some a top hat and some tattered rags.
Like a dusty Mr. Peanut. That's the look.
Okay. I have a couple months to figure out dusty like, Mr. Peanut.
I guess like in the UK, it's more like muddy Mr. Peanut, not dusty. Yeah, muddy Mr. Peanut.
All right. Well, Aaron, we've talked a long time and I'm sure I have a million more questions, but you have a gig tonight at Avant Gardener. So we'll let you get to the Lost Circus.
The Lost Circus. I'm going to find it. We're going to find it. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been really fun. I love talking to you. I think it's great that you have a podcast now. You're like, I always tell people you're one of the premier rave historians. The amount of knowledge about American rave culture and music in general is deep. So this is good. This is a good thing for the culture.
Well, thank you. I strongly believe in the culture that has raised us all. Maybe people will start taking me seriously as a rave historian when I dress like Rave Mr. Peanut.
Yes. Mr. Rave Nut.
Hopefully so. Whew, I got work to do.
Yeah.
All right. AC Slater. You can check out his music at soundcloud.com/AC Slater or everywhere on social media.
Yeah. DJ AC Slater, Instagram, Spotify, iTunes, DJACSlater.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel the bass inside.
Rave to the Grave is recorded at the historic Newsstand Studios at Rockefeller Center in New York City. The show is hosted and produced by me, Vivian Host. Our engineer is superstar Joe Hazen. Our theme song is by Star Eyes. All additional music you hear in this episode is by AC Slater. You can listen to Rave to the Grave on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on this and other episodes, check us out on the web at ravetothegrave.org or follow us on Instagram at ravetothe.grave. Until next time, permission to party.